Hello and welcome back to The Barrow. I am The Barrow White, and today we're continuing German rails in NIMBY rails. We started last time with the Rheinland Pfalz RE1 route, and today we are going to continue that route. Last time we stopped at the town of Hochspeyer, and we are going to move forward through the hills, and coming up really soon, I think we're already going to be to Kaiserslautern. Yeah, here we are, the Hauptbahnhof, the main train station in Kaiserslautern. Now, the town of Kaiserslautern is not really that small. It's a pretty big town. It's in the top 50 towns in Germany, population-wise. It's interesting in that at one time, and maybe even still, but I know at one time in the 80s and 90s, and probably the 70s, Kaiserslautern was the largest population of Americans living outside of America in one large community. And that's because Ramstein Air Force Base is there, and there's some Army bases there as well. But I was in the United States Air Force as a younger man, and I was stationed in Germany, and Ramstein was a place that I occasionally went. Now, it used to be when you flew into Germany, you would, as a service member or a family member of a service member, you would fly into Rhein-Main Air Force Base, which was part of the Frankfurter Flughafen, the main airport in Frankfurt, Germany. But that closed in like 96, 97. Right around then, late 90s, it closed to the Americans, meaning it went back to the Flughafen. And if you go into Germany today, you'll probably fly through the Flughafen there, and you can even see the part of the base that used to be American. But nowadays, and since the late 90s, military traffic that flies into Germany will usually land at Ramstein. And it's definitely a big base, and it has a big flight line, and so just lots of air traffic coming through there. And so that's what's going on in Kaiserslautern. Now, I'm sure there's, 150,000 or more, I don't know. There's a lot of Germans living there. So I'm sure that Germans see the city as in a different way, but I see it as where Ramstein Air Force Base is. There's the Pfaffwerk, don't know what that is. There's the Galgenschanze, don't know what that is. But these are just stations along the way. But Galgenschanze isn't even along our way. It's actually a side route for a different train route, or a sideline that has a different train route. I don't know where that goes and what's over that way. We'll explore that some other day. What I'm mostly going to do is stick to the main lines that we're using. So, as you know, we're on Rheinland Pfalz RE1, which stands for Regional Express, number 1. And I'm going to go around the country doing some regional express routes for a while until we have a big network of rails crisscrossing the country. And then I'll come back to these other routes that go through these stations. But before I talk more about that, let's talk about Vogelway. Vogelway is an interesting place in that Americans that are stationed there know it well, because if you are part of the Ramstein Air Force Base population, or probably any American living in Germany, you probably go to Vogelway once in a while to do some shopping. They have a big commissary, which is a grocery store, a big base exchange, which is a department store. And when I was there, I loved going to Vogelway because they had a sports store to buy like ski equipment and rock climbing equipment. And before we go too far, we just built Landstuhl. And Landstuhl is the last landmark for the military that I'll talk about in a little while, the United States military. And Landstuhl unfortunately, is a sad place, because when people are hurt in war, usually in the European or Asian theater, usually we'll fly them to Ramstein Air Force Base and over to Landstuhl, because there's a very large, very well-equipped Army hospital there. And that's where people who have been injured in war will be treated and hopefully saved. But let's move on and talk about Germany some more. There's something interesting. When I laid down this station, it gave the automatic name of Deutsche Post. It would seem that the post office is naturally at or near the train stations. Makes sense. It's a great way to move postage, letters, and packages around the country by rail. So it makes sense that one of the nearest landmarks that NIMBY Rails would find would be the post office, because that's what Deutsche Post is. That's their postal service. In America, it would be the USPS, the United States Postal Service. In other countries, it would be whatever they use, because I'm sure that a lot of countries, especially countries like this that have such an extensive rail system, would rely on trains to move their postage around the country. But you see that fairly often. When in NIMBY Rails, it'll say Deutsche Post. But this is the, never mind there. It's like we already did the Kaiserslautern Hauptbahnhof, but what I'm doing now is adding some stops to our line. Maybe I'll even test it again. Something must not have been working right, because I'm visually scanning the line. I forget, I did this a few days ago. Now, I often make my line settings to wait for the automatic interval that is set. In this case, it's about 30 minutes or an hour. I forget what the interval is. It automatically sets it. And I set it to stop at every station and wait so that it's at least that amount of time between another train on the same route. Right now, there's just one train. So it'll stop and count down. And that's what you're seeing here. And it does that when you only have one train on a route that you know that you're going to have more trains on. And that's why once in a while you'll see it count down. All right, we made it. And it looks like it's working pretty good. Pretty well. All right, let's go back to building. Here I did some single rail crossover. I think this looks good, and it should function well. It just takes a little bit longer to build that out than if you just use double tracks and use the branch feature using double tracks. Now, you may have noticed that several towns have the word Saar in them, or they have the Saar in parentheses. It's because we're in the region of the Saar River, and the Saar River is an important region for many reasons. A lot of great people live there, but it's also part of the Mosel Saar River, wine regions. They kind of come together. You can see bottles with all three of those names on them sometimes. And it looks like I made a little mistake there. I wasn't recording something, so suddenly dropped a few stations in. But that's what the Saar means in all these names. We're just in that region. And I would guess, especially the ones that are along the bigger rivers, but even these side valleys like this are probably, if we went and looked at some photos, we'd probably see a lot of grapes, or vineyards at least, depending on the season. We'd see vineyards, because this whole area, once you get down to the rivers, is just full of wine growing regions. Mostly white wine. But if you like wine, I highly recommend doing a tour of this region. I'm particular to the Mosel, and this route will take us to the Mosel, but not on this episode. We're still a little ways away from the Mosel. Mosella. This is Saarbrücken Ost, which means east. So this town's a little bigger because it's got at least 2 train stations, because it'll have the main train station and it has the east train station. This one says Saarbrücken as well, so it has several train stations in this town. Schafbrücke. It's where you take the sheep across. I wonder if the fields around here were just full of flocks of sheep in the days when they named that bridge. Because that's what Schafbrücke means. Bridge of sheep. Oh, look at this. This train station is called the Tour de France. And it's not the bicycle race. That would be a T-O-U-R. This is Tour. And Tour means gate. It's French gate, or the Gate de France. Because the D-E is a French word, not a German word. But we are really close to France. I think that maybe the Saar River may be the border between the two countries, France and Germany. Yet another train station in this town. That's an interesting little flyover bridge to take you north, or take you further west. Because if you get on the left lines there, you're going to curve down and go south into France. And we don't want to do that. I want to stick with Germany. Though we may make short excursions into other countries. There are a couple ways to build train stations in this game, and that is you can have each line or each blue line, so rail, is a station that trains go in and out both directions. Or you can do it double and do the same thing, or make it so one is always going one direction and the other one is going the other direction. And one of the automatic settings that I have here is that it'll do that when I do a double station. It'll put the directional arrows, so it kind of forces trains to only come into the station on the right side and out of the station on the opposite side. Now there, look at the bottom right real quickly. See that line? I built for like 15 or 20 minutes all the way down into France, completely accidentally. Exactly what I was saying not to do, and I did. And here in a little bit I'll actually show you how far I went before I decided to take that off the video, because this is German rails, not France rails. Now we're getting close to the end of this video, because I know that Völklingen is the last town that I'm building today. But I will say that it has one of the hardest names to pronounce, because it has an umlaut O in it. And if anybody's looking for a way to pronounce umlaut O's in German, I have discovered what works best for me, and it still doesn't sound right. Germans will still look at me funny, but use the combination of ER for that umlaut O. And so instead of Vogel, or was it Völkling, it would be Völkling. And if you say it fast enough, it sounds right. If you want other amazing German tips that really don't sound that great, just ask me. Oh, here, look to the bottom left where the train is now. You see that spur going off to the south that the train is not on? Well, maybe I need to slow down. Anyhow, that's all for this episode. I really appreciate you watching. I hope you'll hit that like and subscribe button. There should be a subscribe button on the window or on the image there. 90 kilometer, 21 stations. You all are awesome for checking it out. I will continue building next time. See ya.